Darius Durant, a young postman with a heart for his community, rang the doorbell of a familiar home on his morning route. He expected nothing more than a quick hello and a signed delivery slip. But as the door creaked open, what greeted him would shake him to his core. Standing in the doorway was Mrs. Thompson, once the epitome of suburban grace, now barely recognizable. Her silver hair hung in greasy clumps, her clothes stained and loose, her eyes vacant. She swayed slightly, and when Darius glanced past her into the house, his breath caught. What he saw inside froze him in place. But before we reveal what he discovered, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. And if stories like this intrigue you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Just hours earlier, Darius had started his day like any other. His alarm broke the silence of dawn, and he moved through his morning routine like clockwork. Splash of water, straighten the uniform, banana and granola bar, out the door. The streets of Copper Hill were still asleep, the air crisp with that peaceful morning chill. To most, this job was just mail and miles, but to Darius, it meant connection, a smile from a dog walker, a wave from a newspaper reader. These little moments gave meaning to the grind. Mid-morning, leaning against his van, Darius sorted his next batch. When he spotted Jane Thompson on the label, a soft smile crossed his face. He remembered her kindness, the way she always asked about his day, her warm voice, her laughter. Delivering to her had always been a small highlight. He headed to Elm Street, humming a tune, not knowing this visit would change everything. As he parked, something felt off. Her once pristine yard now looked tired, overgrown. The flower beds, once so well kept, had weeds creeping through. Still, he brushed it off and walked to the porch, package in hand. But there were more signs. A pile of old newspapers sat untouched, edges yellowed by sun and time. Darius rang the bell. Nothing. He knocked. Still silence. A cold feeling crept in. Mrs. Thompson was never late to answer the door. And what Darius was about to uncover would reveal that something was terribly wrong inside that house. Darius Durant pulled out his notepad with a sigh and scribbled a quick message about the undelivered package. He slipped it into Mrs. Thompson's mailbox, now overflowing with old mail, and that detail hit him like a quiet alarm bell. Something wasn't right. Just as he turned to leave, movement from next door caught his attention. Mr. Jenkins, her longtime neighbor, was out watering his roses. Darius crossed the lawn, waving as he called out, "Good morning, Mr. Jenkins." The older man looked up, shielding his eyes from the sun. "Morning, Darius. How are you?" "Doing okay," Darius replied, then hesitated. "Say, have you seen Mrs. Thompson lately?" Mr. Jenkins paused, frowning. "Now that you mention it, no. Used to see her every morning in the yard. But it's been at least a couple of weeks, I'd say." Darius forced a smile. "Probably just missed her. Thanks, Mr. Jenkins." But as he walked back to his van, the words echoed in his mind. A couple of weeks? That didn't sit right. Mrs. Thompson was one of those people who were always present, watering flowers, waving at neighbors, chatting at her porch. Her silence was loud. He sat in his van for a moment, hand on the steering wheel, trying to brush it off. Maybe she was visiting family. Maybe she was just under the weather. But that mailbox, the weeds, the uncollected papers, and now a neighbor confirming she hadn't been seen in weeks. Something was off. As he pulled away, he glanced at her house in the mirror, hoping, irrationally, she might appear on the porch. But the home remained still, quiet, windows dark like eyes shut tight. He turned the corner, but the image stayed with him. By lunchtime, Darius found himself parked outside Mabel's diner, the place where he usually found comfort in a hot sandwich and a familiar face. The neon sign buzzed faintly in the midday sun, but today, the usual peace was gone. His stomach churned with unease. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside. "Hey there, Darius." Mabel smiled from behind the counter. "The usual?" He nodded distractedly and slid into his spot. "Thanks, Mabel." But he couldn't focus. Not on the scent of coffee, not on the sound of clinking dishes, not even on the steaming Turkey Club sandwich that soon sat untouched in front of him. All he could see was that mailbox, that silent house, Mrs. Thompson's warm voice echoing in his mind. He remembered the cocoa she once gave him on a freezing morning, the way she'd proudly shown off her roses in spring. Her kindness had always been a bright spot in his day, one of the few things that made the routine feel like more than just work. Now she might be in danger, alone, unnoticed. He pushed the plate away. "You okay, honey?" Mabel asked gently. "You've barely touched your food." Darius exhaled, rubbing his temples. "I'm worried about a resident on my route, Mrs. Thompson over on Elm. Have you seen her lately?" Mabel's smile faded as her brow creased. That was the moment Darius knew. This wasn't just a feeling. Something was wrong, and he might be the only one who could do something about it. "Jane Thompson," Mabel murmured, brow furrowed. "Now that you mention it, I haven't seen her at our Tuesday church lunches in a while. Is something wrong?" That was the second person confirming her disappearance. Darius explained what he'd seen, the overflowing mailbox, the unanswered knocks, and the silence. Mabel's expression darkened with every word. "That's not like Jane at all," she said. "She's always been so involved, so present." Darius nodded, conflicted. "I just feel like I should do something, but I don't know what." Mabel reached across the counter and gently touched his hand. "You've got a good heart, Darius. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is." As he walked out of the diner, her words echoed in his mind. He couldn't pretend everything was fine. He couldn't unsee that porch, those old newspapers, that silent house. Jane Thompson had been kind to him, had made him feel like more than just a mailman. He owed her at least this. So he turned the key in his van and headed straight back to Elm Street. The house looked even worse under the harsh afternoon sun. The yard was more unkempt than he remembered, and as he stepped onto the porch, a foul, sickly sweet odor hit him. Something was rotting. He rang the bell again. This time, there was movement. The slow shuffle of feet approached the door. Then it creaked open, and Darius froze. Mrs. Thompson stood before him, but barely. Her silver hair was oily and matted, her face pale, her eyes glazed. Her clothes hung loosely, stained and wrinkled, and there on her pants were red blotches that made Darius's stomach turn. "Mrs. Thompson," he said softly. "It's me, Darius, your mailman. Are you okay?" She blinked, struggling to focus. "Darius, yes, I'm fine, dear. Just a little under the weather." But nothing about her looked fine. Her words were slurred, her body swayed, and the smell, now stronger, told a different story. "Is there someone I can call for you? A doctor? A family member?" She shook her head. No, I'm fine. Just need to rest." She tried to wave him off, but nearly lost her balance. As she moved, the door swung wider, and that's when Darius saw inside. His breath caught in his throat. The once neat, welcoming home was in chaos. Trash everywhere, spoiled food, used medical supplies on the floor, dust thick on every surface. The air was heavy and still, as if the house itself had given up. "This isn't right," he said urgently. "Please, let me help you." "I said I'm fine," she snapped, suddenly louder. "Thank you for your concern, but I can manage." And just like that, she shut the door. He stood there, frozen. The sound of the lock clicking from inside jolted him out of his daze. Darius backed away slowly, heart pounding. The woman he'd known, bright, lively, proud, was gone, replaced by someone fragile, sick, and hiding behind denial. Each step back to his van felt heavier than the last. He knew what he saw. He knew what it meant, and this time, he couldn't ignore it. Darius climbed into his van but didn't start the engine. He just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, heart pounding, mind spinning. He couldn't shake what he'd seen. Mrs. Thompson's blank stare, the red stains, the mess inside her home. She told him she was fine, told him to leave. But every instinct screamed otherwise. He closed his eyes, trying to breathe, trying to convince himself that maybe he was overreacting. After all, he was just the mailman. Was it really his place to step in? But then he remembered her smile, The cocoa in winter, that handwritten Christmas card where she thanked him for always being kind. She had treated him like more than just someone who delivered letters, like a friend, and now she was clearly in trouble. He opened his eyes. No more hesitation, no more waiting. He got out of the van and walked back to her front door with purpose. This time, when he rang the bell, nothing. Again, silence. "Mrs. Thompson," he called, louder now. "It's Darius. Please open the door. I'm worried about you." Still nothing. Just the hum of a distant lawnmower and kids laughing down the street. That eerie normalcy made the silence on her porch feel even more wrong. He knocked. Harder this time. Still no answer. Where was she? He had just seen her minutes ago. Had something happened in that short time? Had she collapsed? Was she hurt? Those red stains on her pants? He couldn't stop thinking about them. What if she was bleeding? What if she couldn't even get to the door? Darius backed away, panic rising. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone. He stared at it. Calling 911 meant crossing a line. What if she was okay and got angry? What if this was none of his business? But what if he left and never saw her again? He took a breath and dialed. The line clicked. 911. What's your emergency? Darius's voice trembled as he spoke. My name is Darius Durant. I'm a mailman, and I think something is seriously wrong with one of the residents on my route. Her name is Jane Thompson. She lives at 1247 Elm Street. He poured out everything. The mailbox, her appearance, the condition of the house, and now her silence. His words came in a rush, fueled by worry and urgency. The dispatcher stayed calm and reassuring. Officers were being sent for a welfare check. And because of the concerning signs, especially the stains, an ambulance was on the way too. When the call ended, Darius sat on the porch steps and exhaled slowly. It was done. He'd crossed the line, and he could only hope. It had been the right one to cross. All Darius could do now was wait. Sitting in his van, he stared at the quiet house, heart heavy with uncertainty. Had he done the right thing, or had he just crossed a line he shouldn't have? Then, the wail of sirens shattered the stillness. Darius stood up from the curb as a police cruiser and an ambulance rounded the corner, lights flashing. Relief and anxiety crashed over him at once. He had set this all in motion, and now there was no going back. 2 officers stepped out, serious and focused. "You the one who called this in?" the taller one asked. "Yes, sir," Darius said, swallowing the knot in his throat. "I'm the mailman, Darius Durant." "What exactly did you see?" He told them everything, how the yard was overgrown, how the mailbox was overflowing, how Mrs. Thompson had looked frail, confused, and how the house reeked of decay and disorder. As he spoke, he saw the concern on their faces grow. "You said she answered the door earlier, but now she's not responding?" the second officer asked. Darius nodded. "She said she was fine, but she wasn't. And now, nothing." The officers exchanged a look and turned toward the house. "All right, stay here. We're going to check it out." Darius watched as they approached the door, one ringing the bell, the other hand on his holster. They knocked loudly, calling her name and identifying themselves. No answer. The silence was chilling. Then, without hesitation, they began preparing to force the door open. "Wait!" Darius called out. "Are you sure that's necessary?" One officer turned back, voice steady but firm. "Sir, based on what you've told us, and the fact that no one's responding, we have reason to believe this is an emergency. We're performing a welfare check. That means entry if needed." Darius backed away, watching as the officers braced themselves and forced the door open with a sharp crack that echoed down the street. He held his breath. The officers disappeared inside. Seconds ticked by like hours. Then suddenly, shouting, "We need medical assistance in here now!" The paramedics, who had been waiting by the ambulance, rushed past Darius and into the house, medical bags in hand, no hesitation. It felt surreal, like a scene from a TV drama playing out in real life. From inside, Darius could hear voices, urgent commands, shuffling equipment, and then a faint, pained moan. It was her, It was Mrs. Thompson. She was alive, but clearly in a bad state. Emotion hit Darius like a wave, relief that she was being helped, guilt that he hadn't acted sooner, and a rising fear of what exactly had been happening behind those closed doors. Neighbors were starting to gather, peeking from windows, stepping cautiously onto porches, drawn by the flashing lights and rising tension. Finally, one of the officers reappeared, his face grim. "Sir," he said quietly, "I need to ask you a few more questions." Darius nodded. "When was the last time you saw her before today?" "Maybe 2 weeks ago," Darius replied. "She usually greets me when I deliver mail. But she just vanished." The officer jotted notes. "Did she ever mention any health issues, family members, anyone who checks in?" Darius shook his head. "No, not that I know of. I think she lives alone." Then the front door opened again, and the paramedics emerged. As the paramedics guided the stretcher outside, Darius froze. There she was, Mrs. Thompson, small, fragile, barely recognizable beneath the straps and blankets. An oxygen mask covered her face. An IV bag hung above her, swaying gently with each step. It hit Darius like a punch to the chest. This wasn't the lively woman who once chatted with him about roses and weather. This was someone on the edge of slipping away. As they loaded her into the ambulance, Darius turned to the officer, voice barely above a whisper. "What happened in there?" The officer sighed. "It's not good. We believe she's a cancer patient. There's evidence of treatments inside, meds, equipment, but she's severely dehydrated and malnourished. She shouldn't have been at home in this condition. She needs full-time care." Darius's knees weakened. "But she answered the door earlier. She said she was fine." The officer nodded gently. "People often hide how bad things are, out of pride, fear, or shame. What matters is you trusted your gut. You may have saved her life." The words should have brought comfort, but instead, they stirred up a storm of guilt. What if I'd acted sooner? How did I not see this coming? Darius then noticed something else, more medical gear being brought out, an IV stand, identical to the one attached to her stretcher. "She was trying to treat herself," the officer explained. "Looks like she was discharged recently. We don't know the full story yet, but she was alone." That realization cut deep. While the neighborhood carried on like normal, Mrs. Thompson was fading, unseen, unheard, and no one, not even Darius, had noticed, until now. As the ambulance doors shut and the sirens wailed into the distance, Darius turned to the officer once more, voice steadier now. "Which hospital are they taking her to? I'd like to check on her, if I can." "Mercy General," the officer replied. "You've already gone above and beyond, Mr. Durant, but I'm sure she'd appreciate a familiar face." Darius stood there as the ambulance disappeared around the corner, the weight of the day pressing heavily on his chest, but so did something else. Purpose. He had started this by trusting his instincts. Now, he felt a quiet responsibility to see it through. He climbed into his van, looked at his remaining mail, then set it aside. Today, there was something more important than deliveries. The doctor's voice softened. "From what we can tell, Mrs. Thompson had recently been discharged from another hospital. She was supposed to receive home care, but that never happened." She paused, frustration clear. "Sadly, this isn't rare, especially for elderly patients with no family to speak for them. People fall through the cracks." Darius clenched his jaw. "But how can that be okay? Someone should have stepped in." "You're right," the doctor said. "There should be safeguards. But between overworked staff, insurance issues, and broken systems, this happens more often than you'd think." As she spoke, Darius's mind drifted. He thought of all those days delivering mail, never suspecting what was happening behind Mrs. Thompson's front door. The guilt was crushing, but a new resolve began to form inside him. "Can I see her?" he asked suddenly. The doctor hesitated. "She's sedated and visiting hours are ending." She studied his face, then nodded. "All right, come with me." As they walked through the quiet halls, Darius tried to brace himself, but nothing could prepare him for the sight of Mrs. Thompson in that hospital bed. Tubes, machines, her body frail and still. He stepped closer, gently taking her hand. Her skin felt cold and delicate. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I should have seen the signs." Then her fingers twitched, her eyelids fluttered, and slowly she woke up. "Darius," she rasped. "What happened?" "You've been very sick," he told her softly. "But you're safe now. You're in the hospital, and you're going to get better." Later, as her strength returned, she looked at him with a tearful smile. "They told me you're the one who found me, that you saved my life." Darius blushed. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," she said gently. "Not everyone would have noticed, not everyone would have cared." She paused, eyes misty. "I was too proud to ask for help, too ashamed to admit I couldn't do it alone." Mrs. Thompson explained everything. The cancer diagnosis, the hospital discharge, the promised home care that never came. Days had turned into weeks. Alone, too weak to cook or clean, she'd started fading away in silence. "I didn't want to be a burden," she said. "You're not a burden," Darius replied firmly. "You should never have been left like that." She squeezed his hand. "The world's not always fair, but people like you give me hope." A knock at the door interrupted them. It was the doctor again. "Mrs. Thompson," she said kindly, "the good news is the cancer hasn't spread as much as we feared. If you agree to treatment, we believe you have a strong chance of recovery." Mrs. Thompson nodded, but her face clouded with worry. "There's one thing," the doctor added. "Your insurance, the level of care you'll need is expensive." Before she could speak, Darius stepped in. "Don't worry about that. Whatever the insurance won't cover, I'll help. And I know the community will too." The doctor blinked in surprise. "That's incredible. Thank you." Mrs. Thompson's eyes welled again. "Darius, I can't accept that. It's too much." "Yes, you can," he said. "You were always there for us. Now it's our turn to be there for you." They sat quietly for a moment. "It's strange," Mrs. Thompson said, smiling, "how our little mail drop conversations led to this." Darius nodded. "That's what a community is, right? Being there when it really counts." Then he leaned forward and said with a quiet conviction, "You're not alone anymore. We're in this together." And for the first time in months, Mrs. Thompson truly believed it. The journey ahead would be tough, but she wouldn't face it alone. All it took was someone paying attention, someone who cared, and that made all the difference.